Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Let's Process That podcast with Emily and Nick. I'm Emily Christopher.
And I'm Nick Connerkamp.
And we are so glad that you have joined us again here on our podcast. Again, thank you guys so much for all the feedback. Thank you for joining us. We are actually committing this entire podcast to questions that we have received. If you do not hear your question read, do not fret. That means that you probably gave us something that deserves an entire episode to unpack and process. So, we are going to dive right in with today's questions, and I'm just going to read them straight from either the emails or the Instagram DMs, Facebook DMs, all those things, and we're going to process it. Nick, are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Let's do it. All right. Question number 1. It says, "Hi, I'm loving the podcast. I listened to your episode on dealing with criticism, and I would love to hear more about how to deal with criticism from those who are close to you, like parents and grandparents." Nick, what you got to say about that?
Just dish that right off to me. You know what?
Absolutely.
When you sent me that question, and immediately I started thinking about that's probably a stage of life situation. Because from my experience, almost everybody comes to a place in their life where they don't need their parents' approval, or they come to that place and buckle and can't get away from it. I say it that way because it seems like sometimes we got to get farther away enough from our parents' house that we can make our own decisions, come up with our own worldviews, and sooner or later, those are going to bump into long-held values that our parents tried to instill and pass on to us. So if we're 30, then there's probably a 30-year-old value, and so they're going to take that very seriously. And I would just spawn off the cuff that the first thing is making sure we're having a good relationship with those people if we want to keep them in our lives before we mess with their core values, and then separate the value from the person. I'm always shocked when people, when we hit a bump in the road over a belief, one belief, and everyone's behavior starts to change. And it's like, wait a minute, why are you changing your behavior towards me because I'm playing around with a new belief system? If we love each other, isn't our love bigger than just what we believe? And so I would say, one, work on that relationship, make sure it's in a solid place before we disagree with that value. And two, probably understand that although it's our life and we can believe any way we want to believe, if it came from our parents and grandparents, it's got generations of equity, generations of traction. And we probably need to understand that that's something pretty important to them. And I would say hit it head on. Just have an honest conversation about why you're coming to the decisions you're coming to. I'll say some more about that in a minute, but what do you think when you read that question?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Making sure that you have healthy boundaries and having very open and honest conversation. I've said this before and I'll say it again a million times. I love and respect my parents immensely. Absolutely. But there are things we disagree on.
Yep.
And so for us to be able to have healthy conversation, and say, hey, this is an area that you and I differ, but I love and respect you and you love and respect me. So we're going to put a boundary down, whatever that may look like. Sometimes that means we're not going to talk about certain things or this certain subject where we disagree. You and I just see that we agree to disagree thing, and we just set that aside. And it is really painful when it's the people who have raised you, who have invested their lives into you, and then there's this point of contention that could possibly, if people aren't mature enough or accepting enough to be able to say, okay, we're going to put those differences aside and still focus on the relationship. And that is really, really hard. But you have to, at the end of the day, put a boundary down to protect yourself and to protect the family that you're probably raising or the life that you are creating. Yep. And, again, saying, I love and respect you. And the reason that I'm putting the boundary down is because I do love and respect you. And so just being very conscious of those things and knowing that a lot of times when people act out and are rude about a disagreement, again, it says more about them and where they're at than it does you. And I think that's a hard pill to swallow too, that maybe they've not grown in that area. Maybe that's a place of brokenness for them. And so, not taking it as personally sometimes. And that's hard because, like, especially when it's your parents or grandparents or family
Yeah.
members, like, that's so hard. But I've just sometimes had to accept when people disagree with me or give me really harsh criticism that's from a not good place, that, okay, this is something they're actually dealing with. And I just got to kind of let them deal with it on their own terms and accept that they may never change.
May never change. And I think that's fascinating because as parents, I've got kids and I've tried to
Hmm.
instill in them all my values. I literally, in high school, I told my sons, I'll pay you $100 a book. If you'll read a book of my choosing, I'll pay you $100 up to 10 books, $1,000. But these 10 books were books that are about my values that I wanted them to hold. For whatever reason, neither boy took me up on it, never read any of the books. Today, they would in a heartbeat. Today, they would
Oh,
take the money and run. They both read, so they would do that. So I take those values pretty importantly, and I've instilled those things into them. However, when I say that to you, I also would say I've changed in the last several years. Okay? Not my full belief system, but a couple of my beliefs, a couple of my values.
hmm.
And I should be able to give them the right to do the exact same thing. And I say that out loud to say, you know, I think one of the best things we can do is separate the person from the issue, from the belief.
Hmm.
They're the same person. We love them. We care about them. They voted this way. We voted that way. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. I know families that have split apart over the last
Hmm.
political election. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why would you lose 30, 40 years of family over the election? You see the world differently, but you're still a great person. And I think that helping, and sometimes it's the adult child that has to help the adult parent see
Hmm.
that, man, your behavior towards me is toxic. It's going to kill our relationship if you don't change that. And what I want more than anything is relationship with you, not that you and I agree on everything. I think that's
Hmm.
important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough conversation, but it's very necessary. And I think the good and painful part is that once you do have that conversation, then you are allowing them to make the decision. The ball is in their court.
That's true.
You're trying to keep the peace, you're trying to keep the relationship, the love, the joy, all that stuff. So if they aren't willing to do that, then they made that decision, and that, again, that sucks. Like, that's really painful if somebody chooses to hold on to, like, especially a singular belief that doesn't, like, make or break a connection, and they're wanting to, like, that's the hill they're going to die on.
Yeah.
That is really painful, but you have to also stay true to yourself and what you believe. And so, as gentle as possible, as gracious as possible, you have communicated that. And again, that's their decision.
So while we're there, we have to go all the
Hmm.
way. We have to say the hard thing, up to and including limiting them from your life.
Right.
And unfortunately, there are times that a disagreement over a belief system causes toxic behavior that then forces you to say, this is not healthy for me. I feel manipulated. I feel
Hmm.
bulldozed. I feel something. And I'm not going to put up with that. And so, we're family. We're talking about our parents and grandparents. I'll see
Hmm.
you at Christmas for one day, but I cannot
Yeah.
have you in my day-to-day world. And some people think that's just awful, terrible. How could you do that? Because I care about you. Because I care about you so much that if that the parents and the grandparents turn toxic because of this disagreement, and you've done all you know to do, it's not inappropriate to put up boundaries and say, then I'm not going to have this conversation. You said it earlier. You said this conversation is going to be off limits. I'm saying sometimes people can't behave well knowing there's a disagreement. And so it just keeps going and keeps going and it keeps going. And it comes out in different ways, passive aggressive ways. And it may
Hmm.
include putting down a boundary and just saying, I'm going to limit how much relationship we have until you're able to have relationship with me and we can disagree.
Yeah. Um, so I want to bring up a little story. So I was hanging out with a friend recently, and she already had a conversation with her mom. She does not have kids yet.
Mm.
And her mom already told her, well, I'm kind of glad, maybe it's for the best that you live farther away because I already know I'm going to disagree with how you raise your children. And I was like, okay,
There we
wow,
go.
like, I mean, great to have that much self-awareness and insight that you're like, your parent tells you that. Sure, okay. But it's like, oh my gosh, I don't even have a kid. You don't even know what it's going to look like. And they're already like, well, I know I'm going to disagree. So maybe it's best, that I do live X amount of hours a flight away kind of thing. But that was very incredible to me. I just was shocked that somebody already kind of had their mind made up. But sometimes it's when people do put lines in the sand, it makes it really easy.
Hmm.
Again, painful. I don't want to ever back away from how painful this is or could be. But when people vote like that, they're showing you who they are. You're not having to play any games. You're not having to tiptoe
Yeah.
around like they told you. And so
Yeah.
for this friend, I'm like, well, girl, you know
Yeah.
what it's gonna be like, and there it is. You don't have to guess.
Yeah. Her mom did her a big favor. And
Yeah,
even the fact that mom knows that, listen, I'm going to
yeah.
struggle with this. So I'm going to have to
Mm-hmm.
take it in doses. I want to be around you. I love you. I'm going to love your kids. Well, she doesn't know yet. She's going to love those grandbabies so much. She'll be willing to go through hell and high water to get to those grandbabies. But she did
Right.
a big favor by just saying, this is going to be a good adjustment that I live a couple
Mm-hmm.
hours away. And
Yeah.
as adults, I mean, I can't even imagine moving back into my parents' house and having to live by any rules they have because I'm so used to
Mm-hmm.
being independent. And I can only
Mm-hmm.
imagine that doesn't change when you don't move in their house. When they come in the room, there's this weird morphing, of who's in authority, who's in charge, who do we honor, who eats first,
Mm-hmm.
and I can only imagine that gets even worse when you have a change in your worldview that's drastically different than theirs. But I think that
Mm-hmm.
mom did a great job by letting her know that she was going to struggle.
Yeah, yeah. And I moved in with my parents for 1 month before I moved here to Virginia Beach. So last October, I lived with my parents and it went great. Like my parents are wonderful. But it
They
was
are.
funny. As soon as I moved everything back in, I was like, and I would like text my mom and like, "Hi, I just wanted to let you know I'll be home at 9:30." Like,
Yeah,
I
totally.
just there was this like feeling. Well, when I wanted honor and respect, they let me live in their house for a month. But it was just funny, like my 16-year-old self, like needing to text and communicate with my mom, like you're saying, you morph into that, I guess, default relationship or response
Yeah.
that they're the authority, even though you're a full grown adult. So it is navigating relationships, and we could go on and on about this because it's happening a lot with my friends right now because they're getting married, they're having babies, and so they're like, this relationship with my parent is crazy sometimes, and I have several friends whose parents deeply need therapy and healing and like trauma healing, like all this stuff, but their parents aren't really. And they're like, I don't know about all this mental health stuff.
Yeah, you're talking about a generation that never went to counseling. It was never an
Right.
option. Your generation, it's just like everybody goes counseling. My
Oh, yeah.
generation, nobody goes to counseling unless you're just a loser. You're just a hot mess. And so we have to give that older generation a little grace because they're just trained that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love, like the stigma that is being broken.
I do too.
And, I feel like it is trickling down. And I was just actually mentioning to someone the other day, I was like, I am so proud of Nick, because you've grown so much and I've been able to see that. And you're not letting like your generational stigma
Hmm.
of, healing or changing your mind, changing your, a belief about something. Like you're not letting those things hinder you. And so it is really inspirational when people who are 50 plus, um, are brave enough to get healing and to change their minds or to be very open, to something new.
Yep,
But
totally.
it is a challenge though. For
One
sure.
thing that might be interesting is if the person went with their parents to counseling. How scandalous would that be if said, listen, mom, I love you so much, but I want you to come counseling with me so we can talk about this issue. It would be fascinating to see what a third party, how would they would look at the relationship and ask clarifying questions, and reflect back to them what it looks like. I don't know if that's a good idea. Let's process it again before we give that recommendation out to anybody.
Well, I would say that if your parent, grandparent, family member, etc., came to you and they're like, "Hey, this is something we disagree on, but I want to work on that. How do we do that?" And you did offer, "Hey, I would love to sit down with someone to mediate, with a therapist, a counselor." And if that person was ready to do that, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Obviously you can't drag anyone kicking and screaming into therapy because
Won't do any good.
I've seen that firsthand. That does not work. And so yeah, I would say if they're willing to do that, that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Especially somebody who has no bias.
Yep.
Like they're coming in, I think that would be great. But they have to be willing to do the work. So deep sigh. But to this person, we are cheering you on. We're believing for the best. I think you said this like one of our first episodes, like we are two people who believe in redemption and we believe that beauty can come from ashes. And so I'm hoping that can happen, that you know how to communicate clearly and that the people receiving it would also be open and can communicate. That's another thing. I find that a lot of people don't know how to communicate their feelings.
Yeah.
And so they don't even know what to say back to you.
And some of the most unhealthy relationships we have are with family.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, absolutely.
You get to pick your own friends. They stay in your life for a season or for a reason or sometimes for a lifetime. But your family's there forever. And your relationship was established as you're a kid. And as you grow, then that's some of the hardest, most unhealthy relationships are within your family. So I applaud the person who sent this question in and just say, that's real life stuff right there. But you're worth fighting for and you're worth being authentic. And absolutely. You're not pretending, from what I can tell, you're not saying that you're right about everything. You're just wanting room to explore and figure out what you do believe. And relationship with family members should not be dictated on a belief system, in my opinion.
I agree. All right. Let's get to this next question. Here we go. It says, "Hey guys, loving your podcast. Thank you so much for sharing. This question is mostly for Emily, but would love to hear Nick's response as well. I recently moved away from the city I had been in for years. I made great connections and friendships there that I thought would last me a lifetime. But as soon as I moved, it's like I don't exist anymore. I know I'm hours away, but it hurts that these people didn't want to continue to have a relationship with me. I've reached out with little in return. What do you do with that?"
Yes, Emily.
Mine now.
What do you do with that?
Emily goes, "How honest does she need to be?" Okay, so one, I want to say I'm really sorry that you feel like you've lost a community, a friend group, a support system, especially if you were in a city that you weren't raised in. I know that's always, it's hard to go somewhere new and build all this up and then leave it. And it just is kind of like, do these people know I still exist? Like, what the heck? But this has happened for me, and I will be honest, the first 6 months that I moved away, I felt like a lot of people thought I just fell off the face of the earth. And it was the people that I thought would have been there for me reached out. And of course, my thinking at the time was, I'm the one who moved. Y'all should be at least checking in on me. And so, yeah, I'm the one who's got a whole new life, a whole new job. I moved away and only know a handful of people here. So I was very upset. And so, it took me a long time to walk through the grieving process of that, especially people who, even publicly, said that they had my back and they were proud of me and they were going to be there for me. And then again, I'm gone and cricket. And so I went to therapy and I sat down with, just an amazing woman who lives in California. And, she was also informally in ministry and just was brilliant. And so we really processed my hurt and pain with all that and my failed expectations, my anger and grief. And slowly but surely, I was able to release that. and realize, kind of like we're echoing this again, some people are there for a reason, some for a season, some for a lifetime. But I had to accept that those people were my guides or that influence or whatever in my life for that little block of time.
Yep.
And they served their purpose, and now they're not there. And I had to just say, okay, I'm releasing that, and I'm welcoming any and all the new beautiful influences, guides, mentors, leaders, friends, whatever, into that space, because there was an emptiness. And so now it's been amazing just to see the people who have come into my life, and have filled those spots or are giving me new relationships and dynamics that I've never had before. And so it's really hard, but it's really good to release those things, because when we release them, we make space for the new to come in. And, when you're holding on to something really tight and you have your fist around it and you're just, it's balled up, it's hard for there to be anything else in your hand. And so I had to open my hand and say goodbye to those things. And have my hands open to receive new stuff. And there were times where I wanted to like call people out and like pick up the phone and be like, what the heck? You're being a bad this, that, and the other friend, mentor, influence, whatever. But I let it go. And now I'm thankful that I have. Because I don't want to be a person who's bitter or angry. And again, I don't want to block any new relationships in my life. So again, I hope that you will sit with this for a while like I did and mourn or grieve who those people were, but then also get really excited and be very open to the new that's going to come. Because if you're somebody who craves connection and community, your people will come. Like they will. I'm a firm believer that, classic, if you want friends, you got to be a friend. If you want a mentor, you need to start mentoring others. Or if you want a good leader, you just got to start leading yourself first. All those kind of things. So those things, I'm believing with you that will happen for you.
I
Nick.
love it. So, yeah, I love it. And then I have a couple extra things I just want to say on that is one, if you keep all those friends, then when you get to the new city, you can't fully engage and live in that new city. Sort of like what you said about the bald fist and living into the new. I can't start a brand new endeavor right now in my life and take on all the new relationships that come with that endeavor and keep all the relationships from my old endeavor. It doesn't mean I'm mad at anybody. It doesn't mean that they weren't important. It just means I have to manage the relationships because relationships take time and effort and energy. I remember I was talking to this guy one time. He's in his 60s and he said, Nick, I don't have any room in my life for any more relationships. Relationships are important to me. They take time. They take energy. They take maintenance. And I just can't add any new people right now. And I thought, wow, the awareness to be able to say that I'm topped off with relationships. Oops, just dropped my earphone. So it's fascinating to me because he is so aware that he wants to take good care of his relationships and he doesn't have any more space. For me, I would also say this, and after doing my last assignment, now I'm in a new assignment. And the other day, I'm sitting in a community meeting, and 3 people who used to be on my staff are all in the room doing different things than what we used to do years ago. And we're all back in relationship with each other. It was one of those things where we all took a break. We all stayed, friend. We were what do you call it? We were
like
acquaintances.
Yeah,
We were acquaintances. If I saw them in the store, I'd stop and say, hey, what's going on with you? But we weren't calling each other daily. We weren't having lunch on a weekly basis. And yet they came back around. And I love what you said earlier. Celebrate them for the season they were in your life. Leave the door open. And who knows if a year from now, 3 years from now, they might circle back around. But I do think the right thing to do is put more energy into building new relationships in the new city than taking that energy and maintaining old relationships in an old city.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Yeah, I spoke my piece on this one. Anything else with that?
No, ma'am.
Very good. Well, again, just as the first person who asked a question to this person as well, we're cheering you on. We're excited for you and wish you all the best as you make new relationships. All right. Next question. Hello, Emily and Nick. I'm adoring the podcast and find so much freedom in it. Would love to hear more about following the joy and the peace in your life. What does that look like on a daily basis? What are some intentional things you do to honor that in your day-to-day? Thank you. Nick, I'll let you go first on this one.
This is hilarious because literally just a couple hours ago, my wife said, I heard you say that you're being led by joy and you don't look very joyful right now. And I said, it's a journey. I said, it's a process. I said, so what I'm doing right now, I am a type 1 kind of person. I have lived my life by responsibility. I show up, I produce, I try to take care of, I see something needs to be fixed, I fixed it. And you get to a place at least I'm at a place in my life. I don't want to do that anymore. Okay. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I need to do it. And my hope is in this season, I'm led by joy. What are the things that fill my heart? What are the things that come from beauty, that come from brilliance, that come from love, and not out of obligation and duty and responsibility? That's how I'm contrasting it. And one of the things I've been thinking about lately is before I can get to joy, that joy is leading my life, is I have to figure out what I enjoy. Mm. And so I was thinking, I've got 3 or 4 requests for an appointment with me, and I want to take all of them. I just don't have space for it. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to start making decisions that even though I can do things, even though I can meet with people, even though I could do that responsibility, how much will I enjoy that? And can I change the quotient to, instead of 70% responsibility and 20% fun and 10%, coping mechanisms, can I change that to where 60% of my life is led by what I enjoy and the beauty and love and brilliance of the things around me, and then the other 30, 40% being responsibilities, because we're always going to have responsibilities. So one of the things I literally sat down today is started sitting down, making a list of what are my hobbies? What are the things I enjoy doing in this season? Because I'm going to have to be intentional about doing things I enjoy, because I will revert every morning back to responsibility, obligation, and duty. And so what I'm having to do is I'm having to keep enjoy and joy in front of me every single day. And then say, hey, I need to do this, need to do that. So wait a minute, you haven't done any enjoys today. Where's enjoy on your to-do list? And I'm having to intentionally do things, even to stop and read a chapter in a book at lunch, just to say, I enjoy this spy book. I'm going to read this self-help book. I'm going to do 5 things today that I enjoy. That is so foreign to me, but I'm trying to recondition my lifestyle by being intentional to put the joyful things and the enjoy things in front of me and to practice them, because if I don't, I'll slide right back into responsibility and obligation.
Yep, I totally feel that. So on your list, how many things, like, I feel like for you, since this is such an intentional thing you're doing, how many things are you adding to this list? I'm just curious, because people want to know, like, there's clearly people who really struggle with this. So when you made this list, like, are you looking at 1 thing a day? Are you looking at 5? Okay, cool.
Because one's not going to be enough to turn the tide. So for me,
right.
And again, it might be, I'm going to spend an hour watching football tonight instead of working on my book. I love my book, but it's work. I'm going to spend an hour watching football. I am going to read a chapter in the book today. I am going to call someone I like, not someone I need to call and have a friendly chat with them. And I try to, I'm always exercising and watching what I eat. So one of my things to enjoy is eating something that normally wouldn't fit within my eating regimen. And so I'm trying to do these things. We live in a beautiful area. I'm trying to take 5 minutes a day and enjoy the mountains, enjoy looking at a forest of trees, and just the beauty that's around me every day. So these are some of the things I'm doing, is I'm trying to build in daily practices of joy and enjoy.
I love it. That's awesome. And that's very practical stuff. So take that and apply it. For me, I know mine is following the peace. And I wouldn't say I necessarily have a strategy. I have, like, I guess I was about to say policies and procedures, but like There's just some like rules that I have made for myself that I will keep. I guess almost like boundaries. I guess that's probably the best way to say it. Um, where if I feel myself getting above a level 7 of frustration or anxiety or stress, that I'm going to intentionally stop and do 10 minutes of meditation. The other day at work, I was ticked off. It was the first time I was actually like mad about a work thing since I've been there, and I was mad. I was so mad. So, thankfully, one of my coworkers walked by, and I'm somebody that you can tell how I'm feeling. I'm an
You think?
actress, but not with my emotions. And
You think?
so she was like, "Hey, girl," and I was like, "Hello." And she's like, "Let's go for a walk." It actually had cooled off here in Virginia Beach. And so she and I went and walked, and she just let me kind of decompress, and I like shared my heart. She shared her heart because she was also a little stressed over an unrelated issue. And just being outside and reconnecting with myself and
Hmm.
giving myself some grace to open up for peace to be in my heart and not frustration or anger. And I'm also very intentional, and I've always been this. Well, I won't say always. In the last 2-3 years, I am very intentional with my home. I want the home is always tidy. There are candles going if I'm around. There's usually always like a coffee or a kettle of tea on. Like, I just do little small things like that where my home feels cozy and peaceful. Because I know I've said this before, but I'm somebody who is so affected by my environment. And so if my house is always tidy and there's like cozy elements that bring me peace, I'm good. And so, for those of you who might be, I know Nick laid out some very like practical things to apply or to do. Mine would be to look at your environment first. And that can even be in an office space. My office has a bunch of art in it. As soon as we moved into our new office, I immediately bought art and hung it. And there's plants in there. So just things like that to be peaceful. And then also doing the meditation is very important to me. I will stop and meditate, do some breath work, just to kind of like get myself back to earth, because I am such an intense person sometimes, that I need to make sure that the energy that I carry is peaceful because it will impact everyone around me. And I want everybody around me to be like, every time Emily's around, I am joyful and peaceful and I feel valued and loved. And I don't want anyone to feel those negative things that sometimes come when I'm not at peace. So those are my intentional things.
So let me respond to that. I think the first thing I would recommend is to ask somebody to name their word that they want to
Mm.
lead them. They may say love, they may say fun,
Mm-hmm.
they may say whatever. And to name that and then begin to describe it through practical applications every day. Describe it
Mm-hmm.
by what are some practical things I can do today. What I'm finding interesting is that there's an awareness now that I carry. An awareness
Mm.
when I'm talking to someone that I don't enjoy this conversation, or that I'm not energized and joyful when I left their presence. I feel drained. And so as I'm doing practical applications of things I already know I enjoy, then I'm becoming hyper aware of the things that are the opposite. Or when I do something, say, that was so much fun. I enjoyed that so much. Okay, now I have a new activity to put on my list. And so I think it's just a complete retraining, and we get to choose what we want to lead us. And so I really love that you had already known your word was peace, and I knew my word was joy, and we hadn't had any conversation whatsoever. And then suddenly we throw it in there, and somebody heard us say that, and then sent this question in. And once you do that again, once you're changing, you have to tell people that you're in process and you're changing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like my wife saying, wait a minute, that doesn't look very, I'm growing. It's a process. Let me have a few minutes. So anyway, that's the direction we're going. And I really think that we can be more proactive with our own lives.
Mm-hmm. And I love that Tina called you out on that because you've communicated that And so when we have people in our life who care about us and are like, hey, you said this is
Mm-hmm.
something you wanted to do or this is something you were working on. I think that's so good for someone to circle back and get us back on the ground and remind us why we are choosing to step into these places and to really do those things. So I think that's awesome.
But you
Awesome,
and I did
awesome.
not give everybody permission to call us out again for not.
Yeah,
We've done
you
that
don't. No, just
before.
kidding. Yeah,
Yeah.
no. These are people who have direct relationship. But thank you so much for reining us in. Oh man, awesome. Well, and I hope whoever, well, I do know who submitted this question. So I hope to you that you pick your word and hopefully, you can apply some of these things. And I'd also be curious to hear from some of you guys. And we have people who sound off in the comments on YouTube, on Instagram. We get a lot of direct messages. I
Yeah.
think because people feel a lot of what we're talking about is very vulnerable and very personal stuff. So a lot of people don't post them publicly. But I love when you guys respond. And so please let us know, is there a word that you've kind of applied? And this could be for a year, a month, a week, I don't know.
I love that.
And let us know how you're applying intentional steps or processes or whatever to make sure that you are following the joy, the peace, the hope, the love, etc. All right, one more question.
Okay.
And that is, it starts out, I'm normally an overly sensitive person. In the
Hmm.
last few years, it has brought about a spirit of anger in me that I don't like. I am having a hard time dealing with what I see as an anti-Christian attitude. But unfortunately, that has caused me to act in an unchristian way towards those whom I should love in spite of their actions. Any advice?
Whew, she addressed this to you, right?
Nope.
um, I'll say a couple things off the top of my head, then you can hit it back over the net, and let's just play with this for a second.
Yeah.
Anger is a secondary emotion. So
Mm-hmm.
anger is a response. So when we say secondary emotion, it's like the light on the dashboard of your car. The problem is not the light. It's not to take the light bulb out. The problem is that the light bulb is telling you there's a problem under the hood. And
Mm-hmm.
so anger is the light flashing on saying that you're afraid, you feel ashamed, something's going on under the hood that we have to deal with. And so I tell people when they say they have anger issues, I usually will say, number one, we do need to figure out a healthy boundary that doesn't play out too far because that could be destructive. But the real issue is not to learn how not to be angry. It is to deal with the underlying issues. This person honestly, confesses that they're overly sensitive. And I would probably say that if this person is overly sensitive, it doesn't matter who the people are around them, they're going to get hurt. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
feel every bit of that rejection or whatever they're feeling that's making them angry. They're going to keep feeling that because they're the common denominator. And I would just say, I'm sure they're beautiful. I'm sure they're brilliant. I'm sure they're wonderful. But because of that oversensitivity, they feel things differently, interpret things
Mm-hmm.
differently than probably they were ever even intended. So I would encourage that person to go get therapy, go to counseling, sit down, and talk about the last 5 times that your anger was triggered.
Mm.
And there's probably a pattern, and there's probably somewhere an area of your heart or life that's very sensitive. And when someone bumps into it, it hurts really bad, and therefore you get really angry. And I, for your sake, not anybody else's sake, but for your sake, I would just encourage you to go sit down with a competent counselor, talk about this a little bit, and see if there's not ways to resolve the underlying issue and ways to toughen up a little bit in those areas so that the sting doesn't hurt as bad. Because it feels like it hurts worse for you than it might for the next person. And I don't want that for you. I don't want you walking around and being dinged and hurt on a regular
Mm-hmm.
basis. So I'm less worried about the anger issue than the pain that you might be feeling when things happen or things are said and how you interpret that about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll say feelers are amazing people. Like
Wonderful.
people who are sensitive to different things, they have an insight that a lot of people don't have. And some of my very best friends are very emotional. They are feelers, feelers, feelers. They feel everything.
Hmm.
And it's taken me a while to understand that. Because I feel like I'm an emotional person, but I feel like I got some thick skin, and
Yes, you
sometimes
do.
that's great. Sometimes it's not so great because, I'll let some stuff bounce off where I probably shouldn't have. But, um, so with that, I want to say you can use this as a gift, if it's healed and channeled differently to feel things. Because it is a gift when people can be empathetic, can relate, can be gentle because they feel what another person is feeling. With that, I love what you said, Nick, about writing down the last 5 times that you were angry. What were those things that triggered that anger? And then to sit down with a therapist and say, here are these things, let's unpack that. I think that would almost be a nice little thing we do for all kinds of, if we are feeling different emotions and there's like a prominent emotion that is manifesting in our lives, making record of those things and being able to look back and analyze those and ask some questions about why those emotions are there are great. And that can be about anything. Like record even you were like, oh my gosh, I've been so joyful lately. Well, what are those 5 things, just as we were talking about? Maybe those are the 5 things you wrote down, Nick, that are bringing you joy. So I want to know the root of those things because again, that secondary emotion of anger, there's so much more behind it. There's
Hmm.
so much more behind anger. And so, yeah, I'm with you, Nick. I think sitting down and unpacking those things will be super beneficial. And when we're angry, we sometimes feel misunderstood as well, especially if somebody doesn't get as angry as we are about something. I am a high justice person, and I will be upset or angry about something and then share it with another person. And if they aren't as equally angered as I am, like, do they not understand? They not get it? This is an injustice. And so we want to make sure that we process that in a safe place where we can unpack and we can heal, but also learn how to channel that positively. So yeah, that's how I feel
Well,
about
and
that.
people who are very sensitive can be the most empathetic people. We need those
Mm-hmm.
people. We need empathetic
Yes.
people. They just carry the burden of feeling everything, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
other people's emotions and
Mm-hmm.
taking them on themselves. And so I love this question because they are, one, they are sincere about
Mm-hmm.
wanting to do better. And number
Yeah.
2, have figured that that's come from them being so sensitive. And that's a strength that can be twisted into a weakness. So if we could
Mm.
untwist that a little bit so that this person's not bearing the brunt of that, they're probably a real gift to their family and friends because of how empathetic and caring they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, friend, we hope that you unpack this anger, get some healing, whatever that may look like for you, and use this empathy and these deep feeling emotions for good. Because again, we believe that that can definitely happen. Um, Nick, anything else on any of this? We have run out of time. um, and so we've got more questions, but like I said, we some of those, if we didn't get to them right now, you get a whole podcast committed to your question. Um, and we are constantly taking questions in. I also want to say that. Let's process that podcast at gmail.com. Send them in to us, or you can DM us on Instagram, Facebook. I was trying to think if there's anywhere else, but those are the primary spots that are always being checked. So send them there, email, Instagram, Facebook, because we do want to be able to talk and we are we're soliciting advice, or
Yep.
you're soliciting advice. So we're happy to, we may not always have the best answers. We may not know a situation, but we're happy to help chat and process through some stuff.
And
So
that's what
yeah.
we said since the very beginning. We're not trying to come to conclusions. We're trying to give
Mm-mm.
ideas. We're
Mm-hmm.
trying to process out loud, talk through some stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so we love it when you send stuff in for us to process.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't feel like we have to be the expert on it. We just get to bring our life experience and some things we've seen and some things we know and move the conversation down the field. So keep those messages coming.
Yes, absolutely. All right, friends, thank you again so much for joining us. Make sure that you have subscribed to wherever you listen in. And even if you don't watch the YouTube stream with the video, head on over there and just give us a little subscribe. You may prefer to listen to us audio, and you can stream that wherever you'd like. But we would just also like your little subscribe hit if you don't mind on the YouTube. Make sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure to give us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, all those things. That helps more people get to join the conversation. That gets us to be able to interact on a larger scale, and we want that. We want this open up to anyone and everyone. That'll also help us with the diversity of conversation.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. So we appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, guys.
See you soon.